What Elon is attempting to do is insane. Elon is obsessed with eating AI companies because the news just dropped and he's looking to buy Cursor in a deal that could potentially be worth $60 billion. But this acquisition isn't just an acquisition. There's some sort of work trial partnership agreement here, and there are two possible outcomes. Either Elon buys Cursor for $60 billion, or Elon reneges on the deal, says he doesn't like Cursor, and he pays them $10 billion to be just a part of this strategic partnership. This is astounding as SpaceX moves closer to IPO, and in between the lawsuit that Elon currently has out against OpenAI, meaning yes, he's still trying to eat AI companies. But for now, let's break down what's happening in this $60 billion Cursor deal, because it might be the most expensive work trial of all time. It was announced yesterday that SpaceX and Cursor are in conversations. They're working closely together to create the world's best coding and knowledge work AI. The combination of Cursor leading product and distribution to expert software engineers at SpaceX's million H100 equivalent Colossus training supercomputer centers will allow us to build the world's most useful model. Cursor has also given SpaceX the right to acquire Cursor later this year for $60 billion or pay $10 billion to work together. Wow. This is a bombshell of news leading up to SpaceX IPOing. I think they're going to IPO probably in the next 2 to 3 months, maybe 3 to 4 max. To start this off and give you the analogy, when you think of OpenAI, right? You immediately think of Codex. OpenAI has, they have GPT, whatever, and they have Codex, which is like their platform for coding. Then you go to Anthropic, and we all know Anthropic has Claude Opus, and what makes Anthropic also great is like they have Claude Code, and their models are really good. To this point, X in SpaceX, they don't have this for Grok, right? Like when you think of Grok as a model, you see Grok the same way you would any other model. It's just like a prompting box. But to this point, Super Grok has not been super at coding. So what do? They do probably the thing that made the most logical sense, and this collaboration, this partnership, this potential acqui-hire makes the most sense out of probably any acqui-hire we've seen in probably the last like couple of weeks or months. I will say, do I think Cursor is worth $60 billion? No, Cursor is not worth $60 billion. Cursor is basically to this point VS Code with better features and leveraging other people's models. So Cursor is kind of the shell. They know how to make really good product. They build stuff that people like using. And for the most part, like Cursor was a rocket ship. It was going straight up. And more recently, Cursor has been, I would say, pretty lackluster. They haven't been really growing at the insane rates that they were previously. And a lot of people have been wondering like, okay, like how do they pivot? How do they figure out how to get new people in the door? They're too complex for the vibe coding audience. And then they're also like not really great because they don't own their own model. And other people have like decided to go with like, Claude Code and Codex and some of their competitors. But there's still a fair amount of people that use Cursor, but they haven't been growing at the rate of some of the other AI companies. So what does Elon do? He says, okay, well, we look at this. We have this model. We have this model in SpaceX. We have Grok. And for all intents and purposes, no, I don't think Grok is as good as, GPT or Opus 4.7 or like those two are like the de facto great models. I've also heard Meta's model is getting better. Grok is really good for the simple fact that you can get data on X that you cannot get elsewhere. All of the news lives on X. Literally every piece of news drops on X. So Grok is almost an aggregator of all this news. But for Grok to get smarter and to be able to do more capable things from a coding angle, because we're all sitting here thinking like Anthropic and OpenAI are going to crush and own the whole coding space. To an extent, this is true. But what I wonder is when I look at Cursor, I'm like, is Cursor at 60 billion a better buy than Elon going out and saying, we're going to go buy a Lovable? They think Cursor has an absurd amount of data, right? An insane amount of data, and like, maybe it's not even about the data. Maybe Elon really wants to work with Michael Truel, who is the CEO. He's CEO of Cursor. I mean, he's incredibly smart.
We are seeing an acceleration of demand across especially our enterprise base. And that includes both digital native companies. We have wall-to-wall deployments with companies like Uber.
And like maybe Michael Truel is pretty much like what Alexander Wang is to Meta, right? Where you get a really smart AI leader to come in and help with this, building this aspect of like, what does the Grok product line look like for coding and vibe coding and all of this stuff, right? Because I wonder, I'm like, okay, do we think Cursor right now is a better product than Lovable? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Do we think Cursor is a better marketed product than Lovable? Probably not. And I'm not a Lovable guy. Like, I don't use Lovable, but I think it's a very well marketed product. And when we look at this message, and it's like, work closer together to create the world's best coding and knowledge work AI, the combination of product and distribution to expert software engineers. I'm not overly sold that Cursor is the best distribution platform for XAI, but I am sold on Michael Truell. I think he's a great CEO, crushes it, young guy, understands the space. And I think that ultimately Grok as a coding model will get better with the Cursor CEO kind of leading the helm of like, what does this look like? But for all intents and purposes, this is a better deal for Cursor than it is SpaceX, even though it's still a good deal for SpaceX, right? If we look at this, good deal for SpaceX, great deal for Cursor. For all intents and purposes, I think that Cursor probably would not, I'm not going to say they would die, but I do think they reach a point where like the amount of people who want to use Cursor over other tools like stagnates. And they're probably reaching that place where they're like, we kind of need to reinvent ourselves. And then Elon throws out this lifeline and they're like, yo, you're super talented. Come work with us. Do I think Elon is overpaying? Yes. But Elon has shown that he does not care about overpaying in the short term if he's right in the long term, right? Think about how much he paid for X or Twitter. At the time, was Twitter worth the money he paid for it? No. But right now, when you package Twitter and SpaceX, which is now X, XAI, X Money, all of these things together that he was able to kind of squeeze under this brand of X.com that started with owning the news, I think it makes a ton of sense. So even though Elon might have to pay $60 billion to get them under the umbrella, if SpaceX is able to get Grok in a spot where it's doing, north of $1 billion in revenue, well, Cursor was doing $2 billion in revenue, right? And they're buying Cursor for potentially $60 billion. So if Grok adds a product line or Cursor becomes, Xcode, and Xcode eventually does more than 2 million in revenue, you're in a space where this acquisition makes a ridiculous amount of sense. And if it doesn't work, then this is where Elon gets shafted because you're paying $10 billion in cold hard cash to Cursor. He's not going to be chasing or worrying about liquidity anytime soon as they go public. But this is a strategic play for Elon to say, hey, we are going to take on pretty much every single vertical. The same verticals you see Anthropic deciding to play in, right? Where they like go ahead and say, okay, we have Claude Code, whatever the case is. They want to play in every vertical. Everybody is trying to eat everything. And we're seeing this happen live in real time. And that is why you're starting to see all of these acquisitions leading up to IPO. But what you need to understand, and I'm going to leave us on this cliffhanger for this subject, is what's happening next week, which is Elon Musk versus OpenAI in court. Court starts on Monday. Elon Musk versus OpenAI. And quite frankly, we could be looking up in 6 months and Elon might own a significant stake in OpenAI on top of what he's doing with X. And then things completely go left, right, and center. That's a conversation for another day, and I'll have to make another video on it. But one of the biggest AI trials we will ever see between two giants is taking place next week. So W for Cursor, more so than Elon Musk, but not an L for Elon either on the Cursor acquisition. We'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. I want to know what would happen if Elon wins the case. If Elon wins the lawsuit against OpenAI, it could fundamentally disrupt the company's current structure, trigger massive financial penalty, and potentially force a return to its original nonprofit state. Musk, who donated $38 million in seed funding, claims OpenAI abandoned its oh my God.